Welcome to the Hidden Record. Tonight, we will travel quietly through 100 carefully researched facts about ancient Rome. Our path begins with a small settlement beside the river Tiber, crosses the Roman Republic in the height of the empire, and ends with a legacy that still appears in languages, laws, roads, calendars, and cities. This is not only a story of emperors and armies. It is also the story of bakers rising before dawn, engineers checking the slope of an aqueduct, merchants unloading amphorae at the river port, children practicing letters on wax tablets, and families gathering beside a small household shrine. Rome was never one simple society. It changed across more than 1,000 years, and life differed greatly between rich and poor, free and enslaved, citizen and foreigner, city and countryside. As the facts unfold, imagine the sound of sandals on paving stones, water moving through hidden channels, and voices fading beneath the arches of a public bath. There is no need to remember every date or Latin name. Let each detail arrive slowly, remain for a moment, and then pass. Between the facts, the pause will be gentle and never longer than 15 seconds. Where ancient authors disagree with archaeology, we will be careful about the difference. Rome's foundation story belongs to legend. The city beneath it belongs to excavation. Later, Romans reshaped their own past, just as every generation does. Our task tonight is to keep the wonder, while staying close to what historians and surviving evidence can genuinely support. We will move from government to architecture, from food and clothing to religion and entertainment, and from distant frontiers back to the streets of Rome. By the end, the ancient city will feel less like a collection of ruined monuments, and more like a place where millions of individual lives once met. Settle in, lower the lights, and let the road begin beside the Tiber. Roman tradition dated the city's founding to 753 BCE and told how Romulus established Rome after a conflict with his twin Remus. Historians treat this as a powerful origin legend rather than a literal eyewitness account. Archaeology shows that communities occupied the hills beside the Tiber long before Rome became a great city. The river offered transport and water, while nearby hills provided defensible ground above its floodplain. Early Rome was influenced by neighboring Latin, Sabine, Greek, and Etruscan cultures. Its religion, alphabet, building methods, political customs, and art developed through contact rather than in complete isolation. Romans remembered an age of 7 kings before the Republic. Although individual stories are difficult to verify, archaeology confirms that the settlement grew dramatically during the centuries traditionally associated with the monarchy. Roman tradition placed the beginning of the Republic in 509 BCE after the last king was expelled. Power was then distributed among elected officials, assemblies, and a Senate dominated by elite families. The Republic normally elected 2 consuls each year. Sharing the office and limiting its duration were meant to reduce the danger that one person could permanently control the state. The Roman Senate began as a council of leading men. Its formal legal powers changed over time, but its experience, prestige, finances, and influence over foreign affairs made it central to republican government. Roman citizens voted in several different assemblies, organized by wealth, military group, or neighborhood tribe. The arrangements gave citizens a real political role, though wealthier voters often possessed important advantages. The 12 Tables, traditionally dated to the mid-5th century BCE, publicly recorded important legal rules. Their survival is fragmentary, but Romans later regarded them as the foundation of their written law. Conflict between patricians and plebeians unfolded over generations. Plebeians gained their own officials, the tribunes, whose protective authority became a major part of the republic's political balance. Roman citizenship was not fixed to one narrow ethnic identity. Over centuries, Rome extended different degrees of citizenship and legal status to communities across Italy and eventually far beyond it. The Appian Way began in 312 BCE under the censor Appius Claudius Caecus. It first connected Rome with Capua and later stretched toward Brundisium, creating an enduring route through southern Italy. Rome fought 3 Punic Wars against Carthage between 264 and 146 BCE. Victory made Rome the dominant power in the Western Mediterranean, but the conflicts demanded enormous resources and caused severe losses. During the Second Punic War, the Carthaginian commander Hannibal crossed the Alps into Italy. His victory shocked Rome, yet he never captured the city, and Roman forces eventually carried the war to North Africa. Expansion brought land, wealth, enslaved people, and new military commitments. It also intensified inequality and political competition, contributing to the crises that destabilized the late Republic. Roman soldiers of the Middle Republic were generally citizens organized according to property and age. Later reforms and social changes helped create armies whose long-serving troops could become personally loyal to successful commanders. Julius Caesar conquered much of Gaul between 58 and 50 BCE. His campaigns increased his wealth, reputation, and military power, while deepening fear among political rivals in Rome. In 49 BCE, Caesar crossed the Rubicon River with troops, defying senatorial orders and beginning civil war. The phrase crossing the Rubicon later came to mean taking an irreversible step. Caesar became dictator for life but was assassinated on the Ides of March in 44 BCE. His killers said they were defending the Republic, yet the assassination produced further civil wars. Caesar's adopted heir Octavian defeated Mark Antony and Cleopatra. In 27 BCE, the Senate gave him the honorific Augustus, a date commonly used to mark the beginning of the Roman Empire. Augustus maintained republican offices and language while holding decisive control over armies, provinces, and political advancement. This carefully constructed system allowed monarchy to exist without openly calling the ruler a king. The term Pax Romana describes a long period of relative stability beginning under Augustus. It did not mean an absence of war, but many regions experienced sustained administration, trade, and urban growth. The empire reached its greatest territorial extent under Trajan in the early 2nd century CE. Roman authority then stretched from Britain to the Middle East, and from the Rhine and Danube to North Africa. Rome governed through provinces, but local arrangements varied widely. City councils, regional elites, existing laws, and local languages often continued under an imperial framework shaped by taxation and loyalty. Latin dominated government and public life in much of the Western Empire, while Greek remained deeply important across the Eastern Mediterranean. Many educated Romans moved comfortably between both languages. In 212 CE, Emperor Caracalla extended Roman citizenship to nearly all free inhabitants of the empire. The decision transformed a once selective status, though differences of wealth and legal privilege remained. At Rome, the Forum was a center of law, politics, religion, commerce, and public memory. Temples, basilicas, monuments, and speaking platforms accumulated there over many centuries. The Palatine Hill overlooked the Forum and became closely associated with imperial residences. The modern word palace ultimately descends from the name of this hill. The Capitoline Hill held one of Rome's most important temples, dedicated to Jupiter, Juno, and Minerva. Triumphing generals completed their ceremonial processions near this religious center. The Cloaca Maxima began as part of an early drainage system that helped make the low ground around the Forum usable. Sections continued to carry water through Rome for centuries. Roman aqueducts usually moved water by gravity along a carefully controlled downward slope. The famous arcades were only one part of systems that often ran underground for much of their route. By late antiquity, multiple aqueducts supplied Rome with water for fountains, baths, households, and industry. Access was unequal, but the network supported a city on an extraordinary scale. Public fountains gave many residents their daily water. Lead pipes existed, yet stone, terracotta, and masonry channels were also used throughout Roman water systems. Roman engineers used the groma to establish straight lines and right angles when surveying roads, camps, and land. Plumb lines hanging from crossed arms helped the surveyor align distant points. Roman roads were built in different ways, depending on terrain and importance. Durable routes combined prepared foundations, drainage, compacted layers, and carefully fitted surfaces, rather than following one universal design. Milestones recorded distances and often named the emperor or official responsible for work on a road. They turned infrastructure into both practical information and public political messaging. The imperial courier system, known as the cursus publicus, used authorized travelers, relay stations, animals, and vehicles. It carried official people and communications, rather than functioning as a public postal service for everyone. Roman concrete could combine lime mortar with volcanic material, such as pozzolana. This technology helped builders create massive vaults, harbor works, domes, and walls with shapes difficult to achieve using cut stone alone. The Pantheon's Great Concrete Dome remains the largest unreinforced concrete dome in the world. Its central oculus admits daylight and rain, turning the changing sky into part of the interior. The Colosseum was begun under Vespasian and dedicated under Titus in 80 CE, with later additions. Its official ancient name was the Flavian Amphitheater, after the ruling dynasty that constructed it. The Colosseum used numbered entrances, corridors, stairs, and tiered seating to move large crowds. Seating reflected social hierarchy, placing spectators according to rank, legal status, and gender. The Circus Maximus hosted chariot racing in the long valley between the Palatine and Aventine hills. Supporters followed racing factions identified by colors, especially the reds, whites, blues, and greens. Roman theaters presented comedy, tragedy, mime, music, and public ceremony. The semicircular design differed from the elongated track of a circus and the oval arena of an amphitheater. Gladiators included enslaved people, prisoners of war, condemned criminals, and free volunteers. Their lives were dangerous, but skilled performers could gain fame, prize money, and sometimes freedom. Ancient spectacles did not occur every day. They were tied to festivals, imperial generosity, political display, and commemorations, making them special public events rather than constant background entertainment. Public baths combined bathing with exercise, conversation, business, reading, and relaxation. Large complexes could include gardens, libraries, shops, and halls decorated with marble, sculpture, and mosaics. Roman bathers moved among rooms of different temperatures, including the frigidarium, tepidarium, and caldarium. Furnaces and raised floors could circulate heated air through a system called a hypocaust. Many urban residents lived in multi-story apartment buildings called insulae. Conditions varied, but upper floors were often cheaper, smaller, harder to reach, and more vulnerable to fire. Wealthier families might occupy a domus organized around an atrium. A roof opening called the compluvium directed rain toward the impluvium basin below, where water could enter a household cistern. The dining room of an affluent Roman home was called a triclinium, a name referring to 3 couches. Formal diners could recline while servants brought courses to low tables. Most Romans wore a tunic as a basic garment. The toga was a formal and distinctly Roman garment for male citizens, impressive in ceremony but bulky for everyday labor. Clothing communicated status through fabric, color, borders, and accessories. Purple dye was especially prestigious, while laws and custom attempted to regulate who could display particular forms of luxury. Romans divided daylight into 12 hours and nighttime into 12 hours, so the length of an hour changed with the season. Sundials and water clocks helped mark time imperfectly. The Roman day began near sunrise. Work, court business, and social calls often started early, while the main meal, cena, commonly took place later in the day. Bread, porridge, legumes, vegetables, olives, fruit, cheese, and wine were everyday foods for many people. Diet depended strongly on region, season, wealth, and access to markets. Garum was a fermented fish sauce used as a seasoning across the Roman world. Amphoraean workshop remains reveal that it was produced and traded on a large scale. Romans normally diluted wine with water. Wine quality varied widely, and spices, herbs, honey, or seawater could be added according to taste and recipe. Street-side establishments sold prepared food and drink to people who lacked large kitchens or simply ate away from home. Counters with built-in containers still survive at Pompeii. Rome's enormous population depended on imported grain, especially from regions such as Egypt and North Africa. State-organized distribution helped supply eligible residents and reduce unrest. Ostia served as Rome's river port near the mouth of the Tiber. Imperial harbor works at nearby Portus expanded the system that moved grain, oil, wine, marble, and other goods toward the capital. Heavy carts faced restrictions inside Rome during much of the day. As a result, Deliveries often moved at night, making ancient streets noisier after dark than a romantic reconstruction might suggest. Amphorae were transport containers designed for goods such as wine, oil, fish sauce, and preserved fruit. Their shapes and stamped markings help archaeologists trace trade routes and production centers. Roman currency included gold aurei, silver denarii, and several bronze denominations, though values and metal content changed over time. Coins also carried portraits and messages across the empire. The denarius remained an important silver coin for centuries. Its name survived long after antiquity in words and currency abbreviations used across parts of Europe and the Middle East. Enslaved people performed agricultural, domestic, industrial, administrative, and educational labor. Their experiences differed, but slavery always rested on legal ownership and the denial of personal freedom. Manumission could release an enslaved person, creating a freedman or freedwoman with defined obligations to a former owner. Freed people became visible participants in trade, religion, family life, and urban commemoration. Roman women could not vote or hold the republic's main political offices. Depending on period and legal arrangement, however, women could own, inherit, and manage property, and sometimes exercise substantial social influence. Children learned through family, apprenticeships, private tutors, or fee-charging schools. Lessons could include reading, writing, arithmetic, literature, rhetoric, and practical skills, but access varied greatly. Wax tablets allowed writing to be scratched with a stylus and smoothed for reuse. Letters, accounts, school exercises, and military records survive because some wooden tablets were preserved in unusual conditions. Graffiti at Pompeii preserves election notices, jokes, greetings, advertisements, insults, love messages, and simple names. These informal words bring ordinary ancient voices unusually close to the present. Roman names could indicate family connections, citizenship, and personal identity, but naming practices changed over time. Women, freed people, provincials, and soldiers did not all follow one simple three-name formula. Households honored protective deities called lares and made offerings at domestic shrines. Religion was woven into family routines as well as public festivals and state ceremony. Roman religion was diverse and adaptable. Communities worshipped traditional Roman gods alongside local deities, imported cults, household spirits, ancestors, and eventually the growing Christian faith. The Vestal Virgins maintained the sacred fire of Vesta. Their long service brought unusual legal privileges and public honor, while violations of their vows were punished with exceptional severity. Saturnalia, held in December, included feasting, gifts, games, and a temporary loosening of social rules. Its celebrations changed over time and cannot be reduced to a direct ancient version of modern Christmas. The Roman calendar once required repeated political adjustment. Julius Caesar's reform created the Julian calendar, which used a 365-day year with an additional leap day on a regular cycle. July was named for Julius Caesar and August for Augustus. Other month names preserve older numbering. September through December once corresponded to the 7th through 10th months. Roman numerals worked well for inscriptions, labels, and accounting, but lacked a positional zero. Everyday calculation could be assisted by counting boards and abaci, rather than performed entirely on paper. The Roman army included citizen legionaries and non-citizen auxiliary troops. Unit size and organization changed, but a legion in the early empire commonly contained several thousand soldiers. A century usually contained about 80 legionaries during much of the early empire, despite its name suggesting 100. A centurion commanded it and served as an experienced professional officer. Roman military camps were carefully organized, with roads, headquarters, storage, workshops, and defensive boundaries. Their repeated layouts helped large forces establish order quickly in unfamiliar places. Legionaries built roads, bridges, forts, and frontier works, as well as fighting. Military engineering supported movement, supply, security, and the long-term presence of Rome in distant provinces. Auxiliary soldiers were recruited from communities across the empire and brought specialized traditions, including cavalry and archery. After honorable service, many received Roman citizenship for themselves and their families. Hadrian's Wall crossed northern Britain for roughly 80 Roman miles. It was not simply an impenetrable barrier, but a controlled frontier zone, with forts, gates, roads, soldiers, and civilian settlements. Veterans sometimes settled in colonies after service. Their new communities could strengthen Roman control, while also mixing military traditions with local languages, families, markets, and beliefs. Roman art borrowed deeply from Greek models, yet it was never mere copying. Artists adapted older styles for portraits, homes, temples, gardens, funerary monuments, and imperial messages. Many Roman statues and buildings were brightly colored. Centuries of weathering removed much of the paint, helping create the modern but misleading image of an entirely white marble world. Mosaics use small pieces of stone, glass, or ceramic to form patterns and pictures. They decorated floors and walls with subjects ranging from mythology to food, landscapes, theater, animals, and daily life. Roman wall painters created architectural illusions, gardens, mythological scenes, and colored panels. The preserved houses around Vesuvius provide an especially rich sequence of changing decorative styles. Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 CE and buried Pompeii, Herculaneum, and surrounding communities. The disaster preserved buildings, objects, inscriptions, food, and human traces that reveal an ancient city in exceptional detail. The architect Vitruvius wrote that good buildings should combine strength, usefulness, and beauty. His surviving treatise became enormously influential during the Renaissance and in later architectural education. Pliny the Elder attempted to gather knowledge of nature, art, medicine, geography, and minerals in his natural history. He died during the eruption of Vesuvius while commanding the fleet at Misenum. The physician Galen wrote extensively on anatomy, treatment, and medical theory in the 2nd century CE. His influence continued for many centuries, even though later discoveries corrected important parts of his work. Latin developed into the Romance languages, including Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, French, and Romanian. It also remained a language of scholarship, religion, law, and science long after Roman rule ended in the West. Christian communities existed in Rome by the 1st century CE and sometimes faced persecution. In 313, Constantine and Licinius announced toleration, and Christianity later received increasing imperial support. Constantine founded Constantinople as an imperial capital in 330 CE on the site of Byzantium. Its position linked routes between Europe and Asia and gave the Eastern Empire a powerful political center. After the death of Theodosius I in 395, the eastern and western courts were ruled separately. The empire had been divided before, but this political separation became lasting. In 476, the last Western emperor ruling from Italy was removed. The date is a useful marker, yet Roman institutions, communities, laws, and identities did not disappear overnight. The Eastern Roman Empire continued for nearly another 1,000 years, centered on Constantinople. Its inhabitants called themselves Romans, although modern historians often use the name Byzantine Empire. Ancient Rome survives not as one untouched inheritance, but as many transformed ones: arches and roads, legal ideas and languages, reused monuments, copied books, city plans, calendars, and stories still being reconsidered. Our 100 facts have carried us from an early settlement beside the Tiber to a city whose influence outlasted its emperors. Let the forum grow quiet, let the lamps fade beneath the arches, and allow the road to continue without you for a while. Good night from the Hidden Record.